Berlin Wall, 1961 to 1989, the Cold War. The Berlin Wall would become a symbol of ideological division and suppression of human rights during the Cold War. It represented the Iron Curtain that separated Western Europe and the Eastern Bloc. In August 1961, the communist government of the German Democratic Republic of East Germany began construction of the wall and placement of barbed wire between West Berlin and the East. Its purpose was to stop Western fascists from entering the socialist state of East Germany and stopping defections from East to West. It would continue to do so until November 9, 1989, when the East German regime announced that its citizens had the right to cross the border when they wanted. The wall goes up. When World War II came to an end in 1945, the victors came together at the Yalta and Potsdam conferences to split Germany into 4 Allied occupation zones. East Germany would go to the Soviet Union, while the western part went to the United States, Great Britain, and France. Even though Berlin was located entirely within the Soviet part of the country, the city would be split into 4 sectors in the same way. The Russians were determined to remove the United States, Britain, and France from Berlin. A Soviet blockade in 1948 attempted to starve them from the city. However, the United States and its allies resisted by dropping food and fuel supplies from aircraft, which became known as the Berlin Airlift. The booming western sector, which was the showcase of capitalism, contrasted sharply to the economically poorer east. Many German refugees flowed from the east to the west, including highly skilled workers such as doctors, teachers, and engineers. Between 1945 to 1961, 15 to 20% of the East German population had left to the west. Premier Nikita Khrushchev, leader of the Soviet Union, had had enough and gave the East German government permission to close Berlin's borders for good. On the night of August 12th and 13th, 1961, East German soldiers, the police force, and volunteer construction workers laid down barbed wire and a cinder block wall which stretched over 100 miles. As the decades went on, the wall developed into a more sophisticated one, featuring a series of tall concrete walls, electrified fences, fortifications, and watchtowers. Escaping East Berlin. Now people would no longer be able to cross freely with ease to go to work or shop, as they had done before. Now, in order to get from west to east, they had to pass through border crossings. The most famous were checkpoints Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. But there were several other border crossings. Which checkpoints or border crossings could be used also depended on nationality, dependent on whether they were West Germans or foreigners or a status such as military personnel or diplomats. West Berliners or West Germans, as well as foreigners, could apply for a visa to get into East Berlin. East Berliners and East Germans, however, were not permitted to cross the border to West Berlin or West Germany. In October 1961, U.S. Chief of Mission in West Berlin E. Allen Leitner was stopped in his car by East German police. This prevention of access for American officials to East Berlin caused a standoff between American and Soviet tanks, which faced off at Checkpoint Charlie. For many hours, both sides stared each other down, waiting for their enemy to fire. The potential for World War III was eventually averted when President John F. Kennedy contacted Nikita Khrushchev and convinced him to withdraw his tanks. The American tanks also backed away soon after. Armed soldiers patrolled the wall and would shoot anyone on sight attempting to escape. Ditches, barbed wire, guard dogs, searchlights, and minefields were also set up to prevent escape attempts. Buildings overlooking the wall were demolished or had their windows bricked up so that people could not escape by jumping from them. At least 171 people were killed trying to cross the wall, but this didn't mean that escape was impossible. Hundreds of East Germans tried to escape across the wall, including by flying in a hot air balloon, by zip line, on a tightrope, in a car without a windshield, by swimming, and through a tunnel. President John F. Kennedy visited Berlin on June 26, 1963. He made a speech known as Ich bin ein Berliner, referring to himself as a Berliner in spirit, as a way of ensuring that the United States would fully support West Berliners and Germans. This would be a big morale boost, but while President John F. Kennedy protested, he realized a wall was better than war. On June 12, 1987, U.S. President Ronald Reagan arrived in West Berlin for its 750th anniversary celebration. In his speech at the Brandenburg Gate, he challenged Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the wall. The fall of the wall. On November 9, 1989, with the Cold War thawing and political changes happening across the Eastern Bloc, the East German government announced that all GDR citizens could visit West Germany and West Berlin. Günter Schabowski, the East German communist official who was the unofficial spokesman, had announced a new freedom of travel for East Germans to the West, in that they could apply for visas from the state agency in an orderly manner. In an unprepared interview, after not having all the information, he said to journalists, "We have decided today to implement a regulation that allows every citizen of the German Democratic Republic to leave East Germany through any of the border crossings." And when asked when this would take effect, he responded, "According to my information, immediately, without delay." From this interpretation, thousands of East Germans gathered around the checkpoints and the wall, creating a party atmosphere. Then the crowd of East Germans crossed the border and climbed onto the wall, celebrating with West Germans on the other side. People knocked down the wall with hammers, and soon with the help of bulldozers, it was pulled down. The reunification of East and West Germany was made official on October 3, 1990.